Okay, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the Middle East Forum's weekly podcast series. My name is Ahnaf Kalam, and I will be moderating today's discussion. Now, Iran has for centuries constituted a resilient, multi-ethnic empire dominated by Persian imperial ambitions. It survived the 20th century collapse of similar realms like the Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian empires. And today, this imperial nature persists, though it is now cloaked in Islamist garb. The Tehran regime perpetuates subjugation through ethnic apartheid, proxy militias, and the expansionist Iranshahr ideology, mirroring historical quests for dominance akin to Russia's Russian world or the Nazi Lebensraum. Yet as religiosity fades and ethno-nationalism rises among oppressed Kurds, Azerbaijanis, Baluchis, and others, fueled by protests, economic ruin, and escalating conflict and airstrikes in 2025, the demands grow for dismantling the current apartheid empire and its transformation into democratic nation-states. Now, joining us today to discuss all of this is Ahmad Hashemi. He's a freelance analyst and a graduate student in strategic intelligence studies at the Institute of World Politics. Welcome, Ahmad. It's very good to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you, Ahnaf. I would also like to thank the Middle East Forum for providing this opportunity for
Yes,
me.
of course. Of course. Now, to begin here, could you give our listeners a sort of broad overview of your views on Iran's historical and current status as a multi-ethnic state, the challenges it faces internally and externally, and your proposed long-term solutions for addressing the threats posed by the regime and its expansionism?
Sure. As we are all aware, even if we watch the news, we will always see news headlines regarding Iran. So Iran is a problem, and the Iran problem is multifaceted. It encompasses its nuclear ambitions, its regional destabilization activities via proxies or via its IRGC Quds force, and its human rights abuses. But today I'm here to discuss the Iran problem from a different perspective through a broader lens of its expansionist ideology that you just mentioned, the Iranshahr ideology or the Greater Iran concept that is which is the source of many, if not most of the problems stemming from Iran. In other words, the imperial nature of Iran or its the expansionist concept of Iranshahr informs and influences Iran's behavior and its domestic and foreign policies. So, regarding the long-term solution, my humble opinion is that the long-term solution for Iran problem, briefly, of course, I will further elaborate on this in our conversation today, is to impose no-fly zones on border areas dominated by ethnic groups and empower oppressed ethnic groups, ethnic minorities to take on the regime, which I further elaborate on this about more details in our coming minutes.
All right, thank you very much. Now, there's a lot to unpack, just even within the description I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast episode. So maybe we can go chronologically here. So starting with the historical context, while empires like the Austro-Hungarian and the Ottoman empires fell apart in the 20th century, multi-ethnic Iran survived under the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, who changed the name from Persia to Iran, partly due to the Aryan influence and to encompass more of these diverse groups. Can you elaborate on how this has allowed a Persian-dominated empire to subjugate non-Persian ethnic minorities, and why short-lived independence movements in regions like Azerbaijan and Kurdistan were crushed and why many experts in the West present a sort of distorted view of Iran as a stable, sort of monolithic state?
Sure. So it is important to understand that Iran is not a normal country, is not a conventional nation state. As you rightly mentioned, it is a multi-ethnic empire. Again, as you correctly provided context for some of the viewers that maybe are not familiar with the nuances, Iran is a multi-ethnic empire, and we all know that the multi-ethnic empires belong to the 20th century, not 21st century. And as you mentioned, Austro-Hungarian Empire, Ottoman Empire, the Soviet Empire, these all they got broken up, disintegrated, again because of the idea and the concept of nation state, which started from the Westphalian Accords and in the Western Europe and expanded all the rest of the world. But the Persian Empire survived all these changes, all these transformations for different reasons. Uh, uh, but the main reason was that Iran had it still has under Pahlavi regime, it had a different militaristic, heavy-handed military presence on non-Persian ethnic areas, and now it has IRGC and other even designated terror organizations, including IRGC Quds Force, and Basij militias and other plainclothes groups that use violence as a means to keep the country integrated superficially, again, because the majority of Iran is non-Persian, and the non-Persian ethnic groups, the oppressed groups, they want to have self-autonomy at least, or there are in some areas we have overtly secessionist movements. And for example, in 1940s, we had a semi-autonomous or semi-independent, some would say, Azerbaijan, or South Azerbaijan, as Azerbaijanis prefer to call it. And also we have Mahabad Republic or Kurdish Republic, again in 1940s. It survived for almost for more than a year, but because of this uh, bipolar world and the actually the Cold War arrangements that were existing between the Soviets and the Americans, this was not viable, and it was crumbled, and the Persian Empire was revived due to the nuances, the rules that were existing during the Cold War era. But again, we witnessed that with the weakening of the central authority after the Islamic Revolution, we had pro autonomy, pro independence forces, again in South Azerbaijan, in Kurdistan, in Turkmen Sahara, Baluchistan, and Arabistan al Ahwaz, or as they prefer to call it, or Khuzestan, as the Iranian regime and the Persian nationalists prefer to name it. But the desire for independence, the desire for equal rights with Persians, with equal settings, equal arrangement, is there, and has always been there. But again, due to regional and international arrangements, they were not able to gain their independence or their autonomy.
All right, thank you. Now, something you've mentioned in the past in some of your remarks in your writings, you describe today's Islamist Republic of Iran as a direct continuation of the Persian Empire in a lot of ways, where the 1979 Islamic Revolution suppressed secessionist movements in regions like Azerbaijan, Kurdistan, Baluchistan, and elsewhere, as you mentioned. Could you explain how non-Persian ethnic groups view this as sort of as a sort of colonial rule, and what examples like the Ardeshir Zahedi reveal about shared goals between Persian nationalists and the Islamist regime? And to piggyback on that, why should Israel support transitions to independent democratic nation states?
Sure. So contemporary secessionist movements that I just mentioned, if anything, they are indicative of the fact that Iran is a divided country. Iran is not Poland. Iran is not as the Persian nationalists prefer to label it, a stable, united, monolithic state. As you rightly mentioned, the ethnic Persian think tankers policy are overrepresented in policy circles, and they in the West, and they contend that Iran is an ancient civilization and is somehow immune to nation state formation, nation state going through nation state processes, like other countries, similar to other countries like Syria, Yugoslavia, Libya, or Iraq underwent. So they think, or they spread the idea that Iran is different than other regimes. Iran has been able to subjugate the minorities and Persianize them, make them Persian Shiite as first-class citizens. But in reality, even though some in the West, many experts in the West, in the US, buy this argument, in reality, we see that internal dynamics in Iran show a starkly different story. And today's Iran is still, of course, a Persian empire, is a continuation of the Pahlavi regime with a Shiite flavor. They added the Shiite extremism, Shiite fundamentalism as another layer, as another element of Persianism, as it unites, because Iran is a Shiite majority nation, it unites the non-Persian ethnic groups. At least this was the idea, that everyone will be united under this glue of Shiite faith. But now that the Shiite faith is declining, the religiosity is declining. We have a totally different geopolitical landscape where, with the decline of religiosity, the ethno-nationalism is rising among the Persians as well as among non-Persians, and this is a serious friction point for a nation that Persians over the last century, last 100 years, tried to depict Iran as again as a stable, united, monolithic country, like Poland, like Slovakia, like many other nations. And you mentioned some of the former regime's officials like Ardashir Zahedi and others. This is a great point, because when I say Iran is a Persian empire with Islamic flavor, these are examples that proves this perspective, this viewpoint. Iran is a Persian empire, and then even the Islamists and the secular Persians, even if no matter the disagreements, they agree on one thing, and that's the Iranshahr ideology, the expansion of imperial Iran. They call it Iranshahr. Sometimes they call it Persian Empire. Sometimes they call it Greater Iran. But the essence is the same. And for example, take the following examples. For instance, Ardashir Zahedi, the last foreign minister of Pahlavi regime, the Shah of Iran's son-in-law, and then as the last foreign minister, he stated in a couple of years ago that he actually, when Qasem Soleimani, the head of the commander of IRGC Quds Force, was eliminated by the Trump administration, he stated that the United States were the real terrorists. And Qasem Soleimani is a hero, was a hero. So he, as a Persian nationalist, as a Pahlavi, a secularist Pahlavi, senior official, considers IRGC commander, a designated terror organization, the commander of that organization, as a hero. and the U.S. as a terrorist nation because he was eliminated with President Trump's order, or Dariush Homayun, the Minister of Information of Pahlavi regime, monarchist, and a member of Nazi Party of Iran, Sumka, uh, obviously a Nazi sympathizer, praised the designated IRGC and stated that he would fight alongside the IRGC to protect Iran, to protect the great Iran, the Iranshahr, and the influence that Iran has in all around the region. So no matter whether they are religious fanatics or secular Persians, they can agree on one thing, and that's the idea of imperial Iran, or revitalizing or reviving the Persian Empire. So the only difference is that they want Iran's transition from Islamist tyranny to monarchist tyranny, with the Persian identity as the core idea. And lastly, I would like to mention Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who has on multiple occasions stated that proudly mentioned and bragged about the fact that he is in contact with IRGC commanders. Again, I cannot underline it, highlight it further, that this is a designated terrorist organization. But he mentions it at multiple occasions that this is an indispensable force, the IRGC, for Iran's transition from current regime to a secular regime. So all these dynamics, all these examples show that how the little disagreement they have, the Persians, whether they are secularists, whether they are Islamists, when it comes to the imperial Persian Empire, or the idea of Iranshahr.
Thank you. There's a lot to unpack in there, but one of the I want to kind of follow up on one of the things you mentioned about Pahlavi and the monarchists. We've talked a lot about the sort of external imperial nature and ambitions of the Islamic Republic, but if we're going to focus a little bit more internally, can you break down Iran's status as an apartheid regime on gender, religious, and especially in this case ethnic fronts? And can you, including how non-Persian groups face systematic marginalization that fuels these secessionist movements, and also why Persian-dominated opposition forces, as you say, like Pahlavi monarchists, why do you believe that they are part of the problem rather than the solution?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, Iran is an apartheid regime on actually three fronts. Everyone agrees that Iran is a gender apartheid, meaning that women and females are treated as less than men. It's in Iran's constitution. It's in Iran's civil law. It's in Iran's daily practices. So no one questions that. And also, Iran is a religion, has a religious apartheid element to its administration, meaning non-Muslims, Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, they are, and also the Sunnis and other non-Shiite Muslims, they are treated as second-class citizens. Again, nobody disputes that. But what Persian nationalists dispute is the third element or the third front of apartheid in Iran, which is even more widespread, more common than the other two. That is the ethnic apartheid in Iran. So this is the most far-reaching form of discrimination in Iran, the ethnic apartheid, which is evident in Iran's treatment of non-Persian populations. So these groups, the non-Persians, are systematically marginalized economically, politically, culturally, and their language, for example, often is banned from public education and media. And And this deep-seated economic, political, and cultural discrimination fuels resentment, rightfully, among the non-Persians, and this has directly contributed to the rise of secessionist and pro-independence movements among Iran's diverse non-Persian ethnic groups. However, Persian dominated opposition forces, particularly the Pahlavi monarchists. They first of all they deny that this discrimination exists, and then of course when they speak to English language media they have a different approach. When they speak among themselves and in Farsi they have a totally different approach regarding the minorities, and they support the regime's suppression of the ethnic minorities because they see it as a threat to Iran's national unity and territorial integrity. So they have no issues with the regime doing the dirty job of butchering and slaughtering the minorities who rise against the regime, who want to be treated equally. South Azerbaijanis, Arabs, Kurds, Baluchis, they make up the bulk of the executions, the imprisonments, and all the other mistreatments in Iran. But the Persian nationalists, the Persian dominated opposition forces, they are either silent when it comes to ethnic minorities, or there's a subtle approval of what the regime is doing. And even worse, they promise when they come to power, they would have even less than current Islamist regime, less toleration, less tolerance actually, compared to the current regime, which allows some room, very limited space for the expression of some aspects of ethnic identity. The monarchists, the Pahlavi monarchists and other Persian-dominated opposition forces, they are opposed to any sort of expression of identity, anything other than Shiite, Persian, and a predominant identity, Iranian, Persian, Shiite. In this definition, they are an Azerbaijani Turk, a Sunni Kurd, a Sunni Baluch, and a Sunni Arab has no space, has no place in that definition of Iranianness. And so as I mentioned, they uh, uh, they promote the idea of one nation, one flag, one country, one language, and all the minority languages need to be eliminated. This is what they advocate for, and so that's why they have promised if they come to power, they would further repress minority groups. That's why they offer no solution. They are part of the problem, and that's maybe one reason that can explain why the opposition forces have not been able to unite against such a barbarian and primitive regime that the Islamic regime is, and present a united front against this regime that belongs to the Middle Ages.
All right, many thanks. I am going to turn to a question from the audience now, from Barry Werner, who asks, is the present Islamist government discrediting religion?
I would say no. Actually, after what happened in July, 12-day war with Israel. Yes, they actually they were promoting nationalist um arguments, nationalist discourses that were unprecedented. They were going to ancient Iran, talking about how great the Cyrus was, how great the so-called the flag bearers of Persian nationalism were, and they were talking less and less about religious extremism, about the strict Sharia law and things like that, because they know they have the pulse of the street. They know that the majority in Iran, unlike maybe some other neighboring countries, they are not religious. They are not Islamists. They wanna break free of or from their religion. Uh, but that doesn't mean that they have given up Islamist ideology or their Islamist principles, because that's their entire existence. They will have an identity crisis, the Iranian regime. So there's no way they can give up on the Islamist ideology, but they just were trying to highlight the nationalist part of it. But that was short-lived. Now that from their perspective, the threat is over. The airstrikes are over. We see more and more return to what they were, what it is in their DNA: Islamism, hostility towards secularism and towards the West and towards Israel.
I'm going to another audience question here from Adam Turner, who asks, my understanding is that there is a sizable population of Kurdish Shia. How many are there? And are these Kurds more loyal to their ethnic ties or to their religious ties?
So the Iranian regime intentionally public doesn't publish the ethnic data, the information, the ethnic makeup of the country. But there's this common understanding that the Kurds are divided, equally divided into Shiite and Sunnis. Shiite Kurds used to be more and more integrated to the center, especially after the Islamic Revolution, because of their Shia common faith. But now that again religion is declining, ethno-nationalism is on the rise. That's why we see even Shiite Kurds, like Shiite Azerbaijanis, South Azerbaijanis. They want the same thing that the Sunnis in Baluchistan or the Sunnis in Arabistan or Ahwaz region of Iran want. So in terms of the makeup, yes, it's almost 50-50 roughly, but that divide, the regime was trying to create a gap. Hey, you Shiites are with me. The Sunnis probably they have some issues. The regime was putting less efforts to absorb them because it didn't make sense. Now that the religion is becoming more and more irrelevant, we see that even in Shiite parts, including especially in Azerbaijan or in the Shiite parts of the Kurdish region, we see more and more opposition to the regime.
I do want to. We're approaching the end of our podcast today, but I do want to ask before we go about the question that kind of everyone is curious about: the role of Israel as it pertains to Iran today and its imperial ambitions. So, with no appetite for U.S. Israeli invasions, why are these local ethnic minority fighters crucial as boots on the ground? And why is territorial collapse into democratic nation states, would you argue, essential to end this sort of Iranshahr ideology, drawing on things like you mentioned, the successes of the breakup of the Soviet Union, or implementing things like no-fly zones in these sort of border areas? What does that look like? What do you see for the future?
So let me start with Israel. Israel's periphery doctrine, I believe um, it's been employed since the first Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion with different variations, which promotes building alliances primarily with non-Arab minority groups in the Middle East. And this doctrine has been fruitful in terms of making alliances with the minorities in the region. However, when it comes to Iran, I believe Israel has put too much focus on Persian nationalists, and that's I think a major flaw in Israel's a public diplomacy approach. I think Israel needs to have this outreach towards non-Persian ethnic minorities as well, because Iranshahr doctrine which you explained it probably better than me. It encourages coercive Persianization of non-Persians in Iran and also territorial expansion via proxy forces abroad. And this is not necessarily a good idea for Israel or any other nation that wants to live in peace with its neighbors. And Iran boasts, the Persian nationalists boast about their hegemony, their dominance over four Arab capitals: Damascus, Beirut, Sana'a, Baghdad. Even though after this October 7th. 2023 and then the consequences of it, Iran's influence has waned and keeps uh, going down. Anyways, I think this Israeli perspective of focusing too much on Persians and Persian nationalists and Pahlavi monarchists, I believe it needs to be revised, and ethnic minorities are the solution for future Iran. And I'll explain it in a bit why the ethnic minorities are the, for example. Azerbaijanis, the South Azerbaijanis, as they prefer to call themselves, they are like their brothers in the North Azerbaijan or the Republic of Azerbaijan. They are very Western, very pro-Israel, pro-Jewish. And we know, for example, in the Republic of Azerbaijan, maybe it's one of the few, if not the only, Muslim majority country where Jews can live and practice their faith freely. And so the main problem with the Persian-dominated opposition forces is that they subscribe to this expansionist Iranshahr or imperial Iran ideology, and thus they cannot be a solution for the future of Iran's future. And again, empowering the ethnic minorities is the solution. But finally, I would like to mention that what we need for the future of Iran, I think there are three steps that are required to end imperial Iran. These three steps are local boots on the ground, territorial collapse, containment through no-fly zone. I will briefly break them down and dive into each of them quickly. So, local boots on the ground. So, with the U.S. And Israel's limited war, the airstrikes in June of this year, the regime, there's no doubt it has shaken to the ground. But a weakened Iran, I argue, that is even will become even more unpredictable and even potentially more dangerous concerning its nuclear proliferation and its domestic repression. So to change the regime, and to do away with the mullah tyranny, the boots on the ground are required. No amount of airstrikes will lead to the regime collapse. And we know that in America, committing troops on the ground not feasible. It's inconsistent with the President Trump's anti-forever wars strategy. And in other words, the political will and geopolitical landscape for massive land invasion required for regime change are absent in the case of Iran. Knowing this reality, the Iranian regime, knowing the fact that there's no appetite for a land invasion, the Iranian regime continues and will continue its malign activities without fearing any serious consequences. So again, no amount of airstrikes, including the potential killing of the country's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, would necessarily lead to a regime change or any positive changes, because Khamenei's killing would potentially make things even worse, as his successor would most likely be a younger and more fanatical cleric. But the good news is that no foreign boots on the ground needed, and the ethnic minorities, they are fighters in Iran's border provinces already exist. No US or Israeli troops needed. The people on the ground, they need to fight this fight. This is their fight, not US or Israeli one. And we all know that foreign interventions, the all-out land invasion, will backfire. And Iran's size, its population, and its other complexities won't allow this. So the United States and Israel, all they need is to work with local political partners and militant groups consisted of fighters from ethnic minorities on the ground to fight the war with Iran. And the next option is territorial collapse. That's very essential to defeat Iranshahr ideology. The regime change again is not sufficient. We need to see the territorial collapse in Iran. And don't get me wrong, the use of all tools of U.S. national power, including maximum economic pressure, airstrikes, kinetic and non-kinetic warfare, even the proper use of elements of U.S. and Israeli soft power, including President Trump's gold standard coercive diplomacy, hybrid war, cyber attacks, all needed to be on the table, especially when it comes to Iran's nuclear proliferation. But in order to defeat the Persian Empire, the Iranshahr ideology, we need a territorial collapse of Iran, and the oppressed ethnic minorities are ready and willing to do that. But finally, the containment through implementation of no-fly zone. I would like to open this, Anaf, a little bit. So we have, in Iran, we have tried all the different approaches. We, the people in Iran, but they haven't worked. All other options have been exhausted with no avail. The so-called reform movement, nationwide uprisings, and the U.S.-Israeli airstrikes have all fallen short of producing desired results. So we had popular uprisings for the last 10, 15 years, and we know that the Iranian regime is equipped to its teeth with the latest repression technologies that it imports from China. And again, Iran is not Poland. Iran is not a monolithic country. It's not easy to have a solidarity movement. And even when we have a solidarity movement, the regime manages to suppress them. Airstrikes, no result. Gradual and peaceful reforms, no result. We had, for a period, I was a part of that movement as well. We believed in Mikhail Gorbachev's glasnost and perestroika type reforms, or Mahatma Gandhi style nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience. They all didn't go well. And we were all disillusioned, including me, who was part of the reform movement. But we realized that this reformist conservative duality is fabricated, is made up by the regime. Just like the elections in Iran, it's an illusion. It's not a real duality. So the solution, again, militant uprising of minority groups accompanied by implementation of no-fly zones. That's the answer to the Iran problem. That's not a short-term, easy solution, but overthrowing the regime, it requires a long-term strategy by the U.S., by Israel, by the West. It requires an unwavering commitment to support the militant uprising of oppressed ethnic groups via implementing no-fly zones and helping and supporting and funding and arming the non-ethnic Persian groups that are fighting on the ground. And we saw in the 12-day war in June that this is a feasible option. This is a feasible scenario where Israel successfully tried it, and Israel gained full air superiority over Iran in just 2 days. And again, there's another success story, and that's the Druze story. I don't want to even go to that because we are running out of time. But in the Druze minority, the Druze model in Syria, we saw that Israel's air support allowed the Druze minority in Syria to take control of their area and prevent a potential massacre of Druze minority by the majority Muslim population. The same model can be implemented, can be replicated in Iran, and so we all what a special attention needs to be paid by the US and Israeli military and intelligence agencies to training, equipping, arming future ethnic minority fighters, including South Azerbaijani militant forces, because South Azerbaijanis are a third of Iran's population. That's why I emphasize their role. Without them, there will be no end to imperial Iran. So simultaneous, this is my last sentence, simultaneous mobilization of various militant uprisings of oppressed ethnic groups, along with the implementation of no-fly zone in minority regions, would overwhelm the regime and the pro-status quo forces, which means Persian nationalist forces, whether the monarchists, Pahlavi monarchists, or other forces, in their response to crush the uprising. And that will be the beginning of the end of the Persian, imperial Persian or Iranshahr project.
Well, many thanks for all of that. Quick comment from an audience member. Lisa Bernard says, "Thank you for this comprehensive and cogent presentation, so clarifying and eye-opening." I completely agree. I'm sure we could have gone on for another hour here, hearing your unique perspective. Thank you again for the time and for sticking around for a little extra there.
Thank you so much, Ahnaf, and thank you, Middle East Forum, for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Now, for our viewers and listeners who are watching this, can you tell us where we can follow more of your work if we want to keep up with what you're doing?
I think if they Google me, they will find my website, ahmadhashemi.net, or my Twitter handle or X handle, which is Mr. Ahmad Hashemi. I don't want to use the Mr., but Ahmad Hashemi was already taken, so so Mr. Ahmad Hashemi and other platforms, they can find me.
All right. Very good. Well, I thank you again. And for our viewers and listeners and our audience members, I want to thank you all again for joining us, for your continued support, and for your participation. I look forward to seeing you Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for our weekly Israel Insider podcast with Ashley Perry. And as always, I thank you all, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.